Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the front porch, and welcome to the Saucy Roots YouTube channel. This is the Sabbath reflection for the first week of the season of garden. If you've been following us over on Substack, then you know that we are working our way through the 7 seasons of a transformational process. My version, anyway. The one that I feel like I've gone through, but that's okay. Everybody's welcome here, so grab a tea. I've been told that these Sabbath reflections are perfect for a warm cup of tea just before bed and snuggling in nice and tight underneath your blankets. This is more reflective, just to warn you. Tonight, I want to talk about molasses. I know. Why molasses? Well, you'll find out. Molasses is that thick, black, gooey, sugary substance that sometimes reaches the bottom of my teacup. I rarely use it, though, simply because I don't have the patience to wait sometimes for that gooey substance to flow slowly into the bottom of my cup. You know what I mean. Okay, so why molasses? This is exactly why, because the garden grows at the pace of being poured out, such as molasses. I have my essay over here, so I'm going to read parts of it to you. There's no amount of energy that we can spend telling the garden to hurry up and grow. There's no amount of yelling or no amount of tending, no amount of controlling can we do to the garden to make it grow faster, to make the food produce better, or to make the flowers bloom any sooner than the season that they have been planted for. Why is that? Because the garden grows at the pace of molasses. There's nothing anxious about a garden. There's nothing even remotely hurried in a garden. Nothing is ever becoming something other than what the DNA of the seed is planted for. Okay, so let me explain this. The oak tree that we heard about in Emberly's story, I think that was about a couple weeks ago in the podcast. It was an oak tree. Emberly was sitting underneath of it looking for wisdom. But an oak tree, it does not want to pick up its acorns and pick up its roots from wherever it's planted just to run off to be a gladiola. No, it doesn't. And a gladiola doesn't pick up its bulb in the ground and say, hey, today I think I want to be a daisy. No, it doesn't do that. And a rose, it doesn't want to be a coneflower. No. The wildflowers, they don't want to be roses. They don't want to be grown in hothouses. They want to grow in open fields where they're planted because that's their comfort zones, you could say. That's their environments. That's their atmospheres. That's where they're supposed to be. So what does that look like for us? Okay, so if we are planted, if we're growing where we are planted, then that's what we have to do, right? The oak tree, okay, here, let's listen. The kale leaf, it doesn't just peel itself off of the stalk and move on and become, what, a vineyard? No. And a vineyard's not going to pick up stakes and its harvest and take off and become something completely different, like a dandelion. It's not going to do that because each seed is specifically planted at the right time, in the right soil, and in the right place for specific growth, for its fruit, and for whatever it needs to become. Maybe this is the first lesson that we're learning in the season of garden. Maybe it is learning that we are seeds and that there are seeds that are planted in specific places that need to grow and flourish, have roots deeply rooted in a specific town or in a specific place, and we need to grow there. So often we are rushed from here and there, leaving time behind at a massive pace in whatever it is. But in all actuality, time is asking us to move at its pace, the pace of molasses, the pace of the garden. Molasses being poured out slowly. So often we get into these hurries to measure the results of our week and to neglect everything that time has pouring out for us that we don't even take the time to pour out the molasses in cookie dough because we don't have the patience for it. Like sometimes I don't have the patience for my tea because I need it in my face now, right? When we want the cookies, we'll take the time. And then we want to celebrate, right? We want to get all those cookies nicely displayed, and we want to get those 3-tiered, beautiful perfectly split logs that are finished, highly polished, so that they can turn into this 3-tiered, beautiful tea service tray things. And then we want to stick all these cookies on and cupcakes, and then we want to stick the flowers inside and make it look just gorgeous, right? Well, that's perfect for a wedding or for something that is brewing at home in a special occasion. But so often we're trained to value speed's abundance over beauty's flourishing, right? Don't get me wrong. This stack can be absolutely gorgeous. And I've seen some pretty amazing work with this kind of tea tray. But without the love and cherished attention that goes into creating said cookies and into creating said tier tray and presentation, the cherished thoughts behind it, where do they go? It becomes almost a worthless project, right? If there's no love behind it, there's no cherished thoughts behind it, the attention is gone. Then we just prioritize production over that loving attention. My friends, the garden is slow. So let's head back there for a second. Slow as molasses. Long before we pick the kale leaves, and long before the seeds are planted in the right time of the moon and in the right soil and in the right seasons, so that they bloom in the right seasons, so that they bear fruit in the right seasons, we all have to understand that once the seeds are planted, we must trust that they're breaking open beneath the soil and that the roots are growing and that the sprouts are sprouting up above the soil line like a tree. Okay, let's go back to the oak tree. We have to assume that once the acorn is in the ground, that the roots are doing its undulating thing where they're bouncing up and down, going deep, growing high, and then that the leaves or the limbs are coming up. They're shooting up towards the sky. And what are they doing? They're looking for the sun because they want to push out their leaves into the brightness of the sun. So all of that gets photosynthesized. So all of it grows in the right time, in the right space, right? We have to wait and trust that the seeds are germinating. We have to wait and trust that the roots are spreading and growing and that the limbs are going to be reaching high into the sky. Or if it's kale, you want to make sure those leaves are growing, producing. But they have to have the right roots. They have to have the right seeds. The work of the seed may be hidden, right? And there's work that we do in our daily lives that is probably also hidden. Our prayer times, our journaling times, our writing times, all of that is done typically in secret, maybe in our secret closets or in our prayer closets. But none of that is wasted energy. None of that. Even in the tiny little seeds, all that energy is packed up so tight within its shell that it's waiting to burst out, right? That's exactly what's happening to us. As we walk through these seasons, we're learning the inner side of us. We're learning how those seeds are ready to burst out with that energy, but we're waiting for the right season to burst out. We're waiting for our roots to shoot out. This is not wasted energy by any means, friends. This is molasses. This is the sacred work of growing at a rhythm that is different than everything else that we've ever known. This is growing at the pace of garden. Sabbath is also a reminder that we need to shelve all of those thoughts for the week. The weeks that all of those, oh my gosh, my deadline didn't get made, those conversations didn't get finished, and those things that are left undone, that, well, they didn't get finished. Well, what Sabbath does is it brings us specifically back to our first loves by asking us to put production aside for presence. The invitation to rest, I understand, can feel completely unsettling. It can feel like anxious thoughts, and it gives us a sense of urgency because those things are not completed. But it's okay, because that is what happens when we don't practice the Sabbath rest. It's taking the time to step out of our norm, to physically rest, to rest our minds, to rest in a spiritual sense, you could also say, to become more faithful in the things that we need to be more faithful in, to tending the things that we are required to be tending in, like our gardens. If you are tending things that aren't yours, then definitely take rest on the Sabbath night. But before you go out running out and buying all the supplies to make ginger snap cookies, and before you jump on Amazon, right, to buy those perfectly sliced up little logs that you're going to make these 3-tiered tea trays out of, let's take a minute and remember where the main ingredient of sugar or those ginger snap cookies come from. Wheat, right? Where does wheat come from? It comes from the tiny little seed head that grows at the top of the wheat stalk. That little seed head has to then be planted back into the ground, right, for another crop for next year. It has to grow. It has to pull out its roots. It has to be rained on. It has to go through months of process. It has to go through the threshing floor. It has to be served up, ground up as a pretty flour, right? Nope, not a corn flour, not a rose, but as a flour for baking breads or cookies or whatnot. Right? But that seed has to be planted in the right moon, in the right soil, and in the right time, and in the right season, so that it grows in the right time, it grows in the right season, and it produces fruit in the right season as well. So then when we get that big plump seed at the top of that wheat stalk, it brings joy to our hearts because we know that we have done it correctly. But all of this happens, right, while we sleep. It all happens without our permission. It all happens without us controlling everything. And it all happens without our presence. Because this is how a garden grows. It grows on its own. We just tend to it. We cultivate it. We water it. We help it. We nourish it by giving it some fertilizer now and then. But it still is going to do it on its own. This life we're experiencing, it's not an accident. This gift we are living is not a machine that we need to control. Not by any means. This space or this places that we feel unfinished, they can all be left behind, especially for the weekend. The conversations that are left unfinished, they can wait. The emails that are piling up in your inbox, they too can wait. Just close the lid on the computer. They can wait. I promise. And the prayers left unanswered, maybe those are your answers. But maybe they're not to be stressed over. Maybe they are to be laid at the foot of the cross and left there until the answers can come. This is the place where we have to relinquish control. I know. Trust me, it's not the easiest thing to do because I've had to relinquish control over several things. And I used to be a control addict. It's terrible. So we got to resist the urge to dig up the past, to dig up the radishes, or to dig up our bank accounts and look at the balances, because that's not where Sabbath is leading us. We have to rely on the soil. We have to rely on what's growing underneath the soil, what's growing inside of us, what's growing in the inner parts of us. That we have to relinquish control over. That we have to put aside, because holy patience belongs to those who will walk in the cool of the garden with the gardener, with that master gardener who knows all, who is all, and who is in all. This, my friends, this is the work that requires the continuous watering, the continuous weeding, the continuous tending, the cultivating, everything else that goes along with gardening. This is the holy work that we're looking at. This is the believing in the unseen. This is the believing that everything that is unseen, it's not missing. It's still there, and it's still working, and it's still growing. So as Sabbath begins, let's just take a moment to let go of that constant need to measure things. Let's put down those measuring sticks. Let's remember that you do not have to force any kind of fruit in your life or in your garden to appear. It will, in its own time and in its own place and in its own season. Instead, let's just trust, remembering that we are rooted and connected, not only to each other, but to the garden and to the source that connects and roots us all together. In time, the fruit will come naturally, because the gardener doesn't forget where he plants the seeds. Just as he doesn't forget where he planted you. He doesn't forget the seeds that are planted within you. So friends, let's just trust tonight in that promise, in the promise that he hasn't forgotten us, and that he will tend the seeds that are within us, and that he will tend to us, and he will make sure our roots are rooted deeply, and that our limbs are growing to the sun, and that our leaves are producing healing for the nations. Go gently on yourself this weekend, my friends.